I had to describe this town with one word, that word would be cornfields. Because other than a Walmart and a few churches, there really wasn't much else. Sounds exciting, right? Well, when you grow up somewhere like this, you learn to find your own ways to stay entertained. That's exactly why me and a group of friends were hiking out of town to play hide and seek in a cemetery that night. The trip to get there was also part of the fun, because it was a good excuse to stop by this little family-owned orchard along the way. They were known around here for their Halloween decorations, and for making really good apple cider. The gates to the orchard were covered in small pumpkins and fake cobwebs, decorated with little plastic spiders, and bales of hay lined the drive to the main building where the shop was. Everything about this place perfectly captures that nostalgic, innocent side of Halloween, all the way down to the little old lady who greets you at the door with her jack-o'-lantern earrings. We got some snacks there and wandered around the pumpkin patch while we finished our cider. Out of nowhere, a girl approached us and introduced herself as Abigail. She looked our age, but was wearing a long slate-gray dress. It was the same style that some of the weird religious communities around there tend to wear. When we explained that we walked all the way from town to play in the cemetery, Abigail's curiosity was piqued. She said that she knew a shortcut and asked if she could join, having never played hide-and-seek before. All 5 of us seemed excited to have someone new join our game, and I started to explain the rules to Abigail as she led us through the back of the orchard to her shortcut. Her path took us through part of the woods none of us had ever explored before. While we hopped over a few stones to cross a creek, I asked her how she knew about this place. She said that she lived here, and when she wasn't working on her dad's farm, she would sometimes go hiking in the woods, and like to walk around the cemetery reading the headstones. After a while, I could see the open grass through the trees. The cemetery was roughly divided into 2 sections. One was packed with small, discolored headstones, while the newer section was more sparsely decorated, with larger monuments and more modern-looking graves. There was a gazebo structure in the newer section that we decided to use as base. We all hung out around there for a while, waiting for the sun to set. Me, my friend John, and Abigail were walking around reading the headstones, when all of a sudden John's eyes got wide, and he froze, staring off into the distance. "Did you guys just see that?" he asked. I looked in the direction he was staring, but wasn't even sure what to look for. He told us that he thinks he just saw someone hiding behind a headstone. We all kept looking in that direction, and then I saw it too. It looked like a head popped up quickly, as if to peek at us, and then disappeared. We all saw the same thing, and stood there, unsure what to do. Aaron was the first to break the silence, suggesting that we go check it out, and that it's probably just an animal or something. As we made our way toward the grave, we saw it again. It definitely didn't look like an animal. It looked like someone popped their head up from the side, bobbing almost frantically for a second, and then disappeared back behind the headstone. Everyone froze, with their eyes glued to that grave. Moments later, it popped out again, but this time it popped out further from behind the grave, revealing what appeared to be a balloon tied to a string. After a sigh of relief, we all ran to the grave to check it out. Sure enough, it was just a purple balloon bobbing slightly in the breeze. We all had a good laugh about what just happened, and then John yelled, "Not it!" to declare that it was time to start the game. Abigail and I were the last 2 to yell "not it," which means we're it for the first round. So we sit down in the center of the gazebo, facing each other, close our eyes, and begin to count out loud while everyone else runs off to find a hiding place. When we got to 100, I opened my eyes and immediately felt a chill as I noticed that Abigail wasn't there. I could have sworn she was counting with me, but there I was, alone in the gazebo. I looked all around and couldn't find her anywhere, so I went out into the cemetery to find the others. The first place I looked was under a bridge where a creek ran through the cemetery. Nobody was there, but as I looked down the creek, I saw something in the woods just outside of the fence. It was too dark to make out what it was, but from where I was standing, it vaguely resembled someone crouching down behind the fence. I started to walk that way, quietly, hoping I could sneak up on someone hiding. But as I got closer, it was clear that this wasn't someone crouching down. It was someone laying down on the rocks next to the creek. And as I reached the fence, the smell confirmed what I was hoping not to find. It was a dead body. I've never seen a dead body outside of a funeral before, and certainly not one this far gone. I fought the urge to throw up and ran back to the gazebo, yelling for everyone to come out. When they did, Aaron didn't believe me, thinking I was just playing some kind of prank on everyone. So he ran to go check it out, while we stayed at the gazebo, continuing to yell for Abigail, who still hadn't come out. When Aaron came back, his face looked pale, and he seemed like he was in a hurry to get out of there. We decided that Abigail knows the area well, and for all we know, she had already gone home. So we left, hoping someone was still up at the house near the orchard. We made it there in record time and pounded on the door. The little old lady who ran the orchard answered, with her husband. We explained what we just found, and the man ran back inside to call the police, while the lady stayed with us on the porch, trying to calm us down and make sure we were okay. Afterwards, the man let John inside to use their phone, and he called his parents to have his dad come pick us up. It was in the news a couple of days later that the body belonged to a girl named Abigail. She was killed by her father, whose body they also found not far from there, in what they were calling an apparent murder-suicide. Later on, we found that her mother had passed away a couple of years before all of this, and was buried in that exact same cemetery. We parked the car behind an old barn so that it couldn't be seen from the road. Not that it mattered, we hadn't seen any other cars for miles, but this wasn't our property and we didn't know whose it was. When I got out of the car, I peeked into the barn through a gap in the boards. Despite the fact that the entire structure was leaning to one side and parts of the roof were missing, it still had all kinds of old, rusty tools clinging to the wall. My friend Andy was already making his way through the weeds toward the house, so I started to head that way too. We've passed this old abandoned house multiple times. It sits along our drive out to the lake where we go swimming each summer. Every time we saw it, we'd talk about how much fun it would be to sneak in and check it out. I finally made it to the back door, which was slightly opened already. The house seemed much bigger now than it had from all the way down the drive. It felt almost imposing for such an old run-down farmhouse. Neither of us had said a word since we got out of the car and had been walking quietly and deliberately the whole time. We looked at each other as if to silently debate who would go first. Then, all of a sudden, the door slammed shut. I felt my heart pound as I jumped back, startled. A strong gust of wind blew through the weeds around us. I was relieved to see the door rock back and forth on its hinges. Feeling slightly defeated by letting the wind scare me, I turned on my flashlight and walked through the door. The first room was a kitchen, and it was like traveling back in time. It looked as though nothing had been touched in decades. Some of the cabinet doors had fallen off the hinges, but the dishes inside them still sat there on the shelves. I wondered why someone would just leave all of this stuff to decay. We continued down a hallway and into a large living room that connected to a set of stairs. We decided to start by exploring up there first. One of the rooms upstairs gave a nice view of the front drive, but otherwise there wasn't really much to see. The rooms were more empty and seemed less lived in than downstairs. As soon as we came back down, we heard something beneath us. A splash. It sounded like someone had tossed a stone into a pool of water. The thought of there being water below us gave me chills, and the decaying floor we were standing on did not help at all. The last thing I wanted was to end up falling into some flooded basement in the dark all the way out here in the country. But we had to see what the basement looked like, so we carefully looked around and eventually found the door. Sure enough, it was completely flooded, with only the top few stairs sticking out of the water. Bits of wood and other debris floated on top. We probably just dislodged some of it when we came downstairs. At this point, most of the creepiness from the house was gone, and the only thing that scared me was the thought of the floor collapsing into this deep, filthy pool. Andy also seemed ready to get out of there, so we walked back down the main hall towards the door. When we got to the kitchen, that's when we heard it. Another splash. But this one was different. It didn't sound like some object falling into the water. It sounded like something was moving through the water. We both froze in the kitchen. "Do you think it's an animal or something?" I whispered. Andy nodded his head yes, but the look in his eyes didn't seem so sure. We could still hear movement in the water, along with dripping, and then a thud. And another thud. It was the sound of footsteps coming up from the basement. We sprinted out the back door towards the car. As soon as we were both in, Andy floored it down the drive. I looked back, but at this point it was too dark to see anything. We never really talked about it again after that night. But I know what I heard, and to this day I still have dreams about someone stepping out of that dark, murky water. My roommate left for the week to visit her sister out of state. And as much as I love the idea of having some quiet time around the house, the thought of staying here alone every night still creeps me out. I should probably keep myself busy while she's gone, and the first thing I wanted to work on were a couple of garden beds for our backyard. It's almost time to get some plants in the ground, and we had so much luck growing things last year that we wanted to expand things a bit this year. I spent most of the day moving dirt around and securing the frames. They look pretty good, and I'm already excited about the thought of fresh tomatoes and peppers this summer. It's getting dark out though. Time to lock up the tools and get cleaned up for the night. I'm completely covered in dirt, so the first thing I do when I get inside is head for the bathroom. I can't help but notice that the shower curtain is closed. We usually leave it open, and seeing it closed reminded me again that I'm here alone at night. What if someone snuck in the house while I was outside and they're hiding in the shower right now, just waiting for me to pull back the curtain? Leaning in, ready to back away if I had to, I quickly pulled the curtain. Nothing. Of course, I'm getting all worked up over nothing. I got in the shower and finished up as quick as I could, unable to shake the feeling that someone else might be in the house. After drying off, I went to the kitchen to start the kettle for some tea. The back door leads out from the kitchen, and I noticed that the lock wasn't latched. I must have just forgotten to lock it when I came in, but it still made me feel uneasy. Someone could have snuck in the house while I was in the shower. They could be hiding somewhere in the house right now. I'm probably just overreacting, but it doesn't hurt to check on things, right? I'll just make sure the closets are empty and that nothing else seems out of place before bed. I checked my room first, and everything looked normal. Next, I decided to check the coat closet in the hall. But as I opened the closet door, I heard a sound. Startled at first, I quickly realized that it was my kettle boiling, so I ran back to the kitchen to shut it off. I poured a cup of tea and tried to calm myself down. I thought maybe I'll text my roommate to see how her drive was going. That way at least I won't feel so alone here. But a few seconds after I sent the text, I heard something. That's the sound my roommate's phone makes when she gets a text, and it was coming from her room. She must have forgotten her phone. So I went to her room and flipped the light on. It wasn't on her dresser where she'd usually keep it, so I texted again. It was coming from under her bed. I knelt down and lifted the covers to look under the bed. And there was my roommate's lifeless body, mutilated and covered in blood. Before I could scream, I heard the bedroom door slam. I turned around just in time to see the axe swinging down towards me.